The science of murder, the analysis of dangerous new psychedelic drugs, and the fingerprints and trace evidence left behind by suspects at crime scenes are just some of the topics that I'm going to be discussing with a panel of forensic science investigators later this month. And you can come along for free. A special public event to celebrate 50 years of Forensic Science Ireland is going to take place at the National Convention Centre in Dublin on May 28th. The doors are at 6 p.m. and tickets are available now on eventbrite.com. Don't miss it.
So, Eamon, we're back together today to discuss the 15th day of evidence in the trial of Richard Satchwell. Mr Satchwell denies the murder of his wife Tina in their home in Youghal, County Cork in March 2017. So as we were talking yesterday, this is the fourth week of evidence in the trial, and today the defence opened its case with the witness who was actually a half-sister of Tina Satchwell, but the relationship was kind of described in court. It was a complicated one.
Yeah, well, she was actually initially described as a sister, but she herself then explained in the witness box that she was actually a half sister, but when she was a bit younger, she actually had originally thought Tina was her aunt. So that's, it shows they share a mother, Mary Collins, and for a long time, she considered her to be an aunt, and then found out that she was actually a biological half sister. So that was at a relatively early age. When I say a long time, it's I think there's 3 years between them, and it was when Tina was going for her confirmation and got her birth cert. She realised that the person, Florence, that she had regarded as a mother was actually her grandmother, who was also Lorraine's grandmother as well.
Okay.
So they're half sisters. So they have the same mother, different fathers.
Okay. And it was described how she was very close to her grandmother, Tina was.
Yeah, she was, yeah. And she was asked then, when Lorraine was asked then, how did Tina react when she found out? And she says, shock, I suppose. She felt she'd been lied to for a long period of her life. Okay. She explained that Florence had raised her, and as far as she was concerned, as a child herself, that was her understanding. She says they got on really well. She says everybody loves Florence. She was a gorgeous woman, is how she put it. She was asked about when Tina got married to Richard Satchwell, and she says she'd only have vague memories because she was a bit younger. And they got married in England at the time when, she would have been 15 and Tina was 18 she was 20 when she married. So Lorraine would have been about 17. But she'd been living in England with her grandmother, Florence, at that stage. And she was explaining that they kind of grew up together, but they weren't in the same household. They lived actually across the road from each other, across the main road. So they used to see each other every day. They'd be back and forth to school, back and across. They were best friends growing up. Every day of the week, she'd sleep in her house sometimes. And then when they discovered that they were half sisters, she said Tina felt resentful and hurt in her eyes that she had been given away, which Lorraine said was not what actually happened. And says she sometimes bore the brunt of that. And she said that this is an on and off thing, this kind of falling out. And she, Lorraine would take her mum's side, and then Tina would take her mother's side, and meaning her grandmother's side, and that was the terminology used.
Okay.
And she said, look, Flo was Florence and Tina were very close, absolutely. And she was trying to explain, I suppose, that, when they were living in the UK and Lorraine was still at home, that there was basically periods when Tina was in her life and then periods when Tina wasn't in her life.
Okay.
And she was kind of, she says they kind of had good years and bad years. And she said, as a family, we had a fairly unique setup. But he says when there was a falling out, it always came back to the same issue, that Tina somehow felt abandoned by her biological mother. And she began, obviously...
Sorry, was it just explained what happened in that she was raised by her grandmother? That wasn't gone into... No,
we heard nothing about this throughout the trial. There's been nothing mentioned on that. Nothing, I suppose, turns in it in terms of the charges against Richard Satchwell.
Okay.
Now, Lorraine Howard, then she did actually become emotional when they brought up Tina's brother Tom taking his life in 2012, and she said his death affected Tina, as much as herself. And like when Tom Dingiven died, everyone in the family, she said, was close to him. He was a lovely person, and that Tina adored Tom and he adored her. And to Tina, he was her brother. Now, he was her uncle, but she had grown up with him as a brother.
Okay.
In that sense, and in fact, she was so devoted to Tom that her family decided to actually bury part of her ashes with him, according to Lorraine.
Okay.
And he says we've two graves. Half of Tina's ashes are in her grandmother's grave, and half are in Tom's grave.
Okay.
So that, I suppose it's giving you a sense of I suppose the closeness there, like she was putting that across. So she was asked then in just to kind of, this is under cross-examination. Well, it's not cross-examination because rather she's the witness being led by the defence counsel, Brendan Grehan. So Brendan Grehan is asking her then to describe the relationship. And one of the first words she comes out with, well, she first met him at her mother's house when she was about 15 years of age. This is her mother's house in Fermoy, and she thought it was odd. The relationship was odd. She said he used to call Tina his trophy wife and his trophy girlfriend, and she didn't like that comment, and she didn't think it was right to call someone a trophy. She said he was possessive, wanting to know where she was all the time, and that every friend she ever had, he'd find some fault with him, and she didn't like the way he was with her. She said, I thought it was controlling and odd. And then they go into some of the statements that she made to the guards.
Yeah, I suppose just to go back on ourselves there, so she was called as a defence witness. So Brendan Grehan opened the case for the defence of Richard Satchwell today. And I guess that's where these statements come from, that she spoke to Gardaí, in the wake of Tina Satchwell's disappearance in 2017, was it?
Yeah, so she's missing since March 2017. March the 24th is when it kind of officially becomes known. Well, the first contact with the guards, and 6.5 years later, then her remains are found in a makeshift grave under the stairs. In their house on Grattan Street in Youghal. So she made a first statement. It was a short one in May 2017, which is, just at the time, I think 11th of May was the actual date the official missing persons report was made. So this is 4 days after that. But there was nothing really turned on that. And she made a longer one then in August 2020, and that was taken by Detective Dave Kelleher, who has been through various tranches of the court case, at different tranches of evidence, because he eventually would become the incident room coordinator. So he's been kind of quite a central witness in the case for both sides, because he has to answer questions from the defence as well.
Okay.
And she explained then in court, like she believed her, when she was making that statement, she believed that she was alive at the time, and she felt that Tina had put untold stress on the family and had ran off with this money, and that she gave that statement. She was angry when she gave it, basically for the stress, and that really she should have, I suppose with hindsight, she's saying that it was Richard Satchwell who put us all through this. Yeah,
because was it the Richard Satchwell originally told the police or the Gardaí that himself and Tina had a row, and she left the dogs behind. She took 2 suitcases and she took €26,000, was it?
Yeah.
That was his what he told Gardaí in the initial stages of the disappearance.
Yeah, and he stuck to that story for 6 years. It wasn't until the body was found, or a body was found, it wasn't even identified as Tina initially, and that was the first time like he acknowledged that he knew where she was all along. So and we've heard from other various witnesses this week and last week as well, about things he said. So he's very much kind of he's very much telling people that Tina's left him, that their relationship was deteriorating, and that she might have been depressed, and that she had often been violent to him, and that he was putting it out there that like he'd even he said that he thought she was still alive, in some of the media interviews that he did, and I think in 2018 he was still saying that.
So the time of Miss Howard's witness statements that were discussed today, this was in the time that this was all going on.
So this is in August 2020. So it's a little bit further on. And they went kind of, it was a much more lengthy statement. She's had a chance to look through the statement. There was a brief break to let her do that.
Yeah.
And the jury are out. And when she was back in then, so she agreed with with counsel for the defence that, that telling the detective that Richard was obsessed with Tina and knew that he was above his league when asked to describe the relationship. She was asked about the balance in the relationship, and she says yes, that Tina wore the trousers, which she said would be correct. She was agreeing with this was what was said in the statement. And asked about spending money, like money on Tina, about Richard Satchwell spending all his money. He said, you'd agree it was a hard job to keep her dressed. Yes, she agreed with that. And he spent every penny to dress her up, and she confirmed that, she would have used the phrase high maintenance in her statement to Gardaí to describe her. Mm. Now, she was also then in this, she was also asked about, any concerns, concerns for her mental health. And she said she did. And she says, because of what happened, like to her what happened to one of her own relatives. And she felt that in one picture that Tina, her hair looked unkempt, and she felt that the smile didn't match the eyes. And that she said she might have had some kind of mental breakdown that could actually account for this person that Richard was saying knocks teeth out and throws cups and scratches people. But she said she'd never seen violence. And he says, we had many arguments, herself and Tina had many arguments, obviously as younger people. But she never went to put her hand behind me. And she said in the statement, I did describe this Jekyll and Hyde personality. Because as she put it, we had this dynamic relationship where sometimes we wouldn't be friends. And she was asked about her Tina's temper, and she said, I believe she did have a temper, and sometimes she'd scream at me and I'd scream back. And later she actually says that she blamed Tina, that she's screaming at her so hard that it caused her to miscarry. And she was asked then about, saying that, that she saw scratches on Richard's back. And she says, yeah, she remembered them being shown to her, but Richard didn't explain where they came from. He didn't say Tina did it. She was also asked about saying that Tina had told her that she had slapped Richard. And she said, well, it was actually a conversation she walked in on in her mother's house, and it was between Tina and her mother. And she was about 15 at the time. And she said, she asked what it was about, and Tina said to her, I slapped Richard. And she said, I don't know in what context that happened. She says, I didn't hear the start of the conversation or the end of it either.
So what if she's very similar age to Tina? So Tina would have been in her 20s then?
There's 3 years in the difference.
3 years in the difference,
she said,
yeah,
so
okay.
it'd be 18 it would add up.
Yeah.
She talks about in her statement, that Tina knew that she couldn't get away from Richard Satchwell, and she confided in her that she had no way to get rid of him, and he'd followed to the ends of the earth. And and one of the comments to the Gardaí, she said in this statement, I wouldn't say Richard is controlling but possessive. And she said, but then she said in court today, now I've revised my view on that. I wasn't part of her life for a long time, and she says my answer was based on information at the time. And when, again, she was asked, if she was concerned she could have taken her own life, she said she did have concerns about that based on her family history. I was fairly concerned about that at the time. Asked about the scars on his head, he said he'd show me every cut. He said if he had a paper cut, he'd blame it on Tina. That, she said that, Richard never described Tina as violent before she went missing. That it was only after she went missing. And she thought she must have had some kind of mental breakdown if she's doing this to Richard, because she had never witnessed any of this behaviour herself. So
this is all her reaction to the witness statements that were...
Yeah. It's a mix of confirming what she said in the witness statement and then also kind of qualifying some of it then today, or explaining it in court today in front of the jury.
Okay.
And she was asked to confirm that she actually hadn't spoken to Tina for 15 years before she died, and who else was she in contact with the family? And she said that she had no idea what was going on with Tina because I wasn't in her life. She said there was an incident. The incident caused a divide in our family straight down the middle, and I couldn't tell you what's going on the other side. And then that really concluded her time in the box. And Brendan Grehan apologised for any upset. Like, she was emotional at times doing it. And she said, look, that's okay. You're just doing your job.
Okay. And how many witness statements? Was it one witness statement she made to Gardaí, or was there...
Well, there was two, but really today's, today's examination was really just the second one, the one in August 2020. The first one was when it was a missing persons.
Yeah.
And then I suppose it was still a missing person in August 2020, but it was a much more lengthy one. I think
Gardaí
were doing a deeper dive, because it would have been sometime after that they did the enhanced cognitive interview
Okay.
with Richard Satchwell as well, which was a long, lengthy statement as well.
Okay, so the August interview was about 6 months after Tina disappeared. And was Miss Howard cross-examined by the prosecution today?
No, they didn't answer. No, there was no questions from Geraldine Small, and
Okay.
and the judge then told the jury that concludes the evidence in the case, and that he explained that you'll be addressed next by each counsel. And then the judge will do his own, what he said is sometimes called the judge's charge, to charge the jury,
Okay.
and kind of explain the principles of law and summarise the case as well.
Okay.
And that they'll be back in tomorrow at 11:30, where we're going to hear the closing statements from presumably from both sides.
Okay, so we had obviously the state opened its case and the evidence ran for until this week, which is the fourth week, and then the defence opened their case. As you said, Brendan Grehan was the senior counsel and Sarah Howard was their witness, and they've closed the case. So now
it was Lorraine Howard today. Yeah,
Lorraine Howard,
yeah.
excuse me. Yeah, and so they've closed their case, and then so closing speeches tomorrow from both. Well, they both hopefully will get to both tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, we don't know how long they'll be.
Yeah.
So I mean, but we'll find out, and then the judge is charged. So there's 3 elements left, and then it's up to the jury.
And then they go out.
It's all down to the 12 members of the jury to
deliberate,
to decide on a verdict.
Yeah, so I suppose they had originally said, as you've told us before, about the 5-week trial, and next week will obviously be the 5th week. So it's been on track so far, and we'll obviously see what happens tomorrow. I suppose the courtroom. This is the courtroom has been busy, and it continued the same way today. Did it?
I know it was, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the usual group of transition year students pop in
Yeah.
as well, like as they get the tours of the court. So I suppose it is one of the trials that people are coming in, and obviously lawyers not necessarily connected to it come in and listen to some of the arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course there's there's probably over a dozen media there as well. So it's fill up. I have to get there early to make sure I get it.
Yeah, it's a long day. Okay, well, thanks very much, Eamon, and we'll be back tomorrow to hear the closing speeches. Thank you.
Thanks. I nearly called you Nicola there. I mean, thanks, Eimear.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.